County Planning and Zoning Commission meeting order for Thursday, May 20th, Jesus. June 16th, 2021. 17th, Dan. Roll call, please.
Mark?
Here.
Chris?
Here.
Sherelle? Dan?
Yes.
Barry?
Here.
Louise?
Here.
Adam?
Here.
Shane?
Here.
Tate?
Here. We do have a quorum. We'll proceed. I would like make a couple quick announcements. One, would welcome Shane Cymbaluk as the board member on the end down here. Welcome. This is his first meeting. And to Sherelle, our deepest sympathy to you and your family on the loss of your husband. On number 7, under new business, I would ask that we move that to the top for the first hearing. And that would be the only change to the agenda that I can see. Can I get a motion to approve that?
Yes.
Is there a second? We have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Motion carries. That's the agenda we're going to follow. I would make one announcement also. The Board of County Commission next meeting will be June 29th at 8 a.m. They changed their dates the other day, so we're letting you know that, because all we are is a recommending board, and that'll be your next step to that board, and it'll be on that date. So June 29th at 8 a.m. Okay, with that said, we have the minutes of the last meeting. What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve. Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, if you wish to speak during the hearing, I'd ask that you come forward, state your name, and say what you wish, I guess, at that point. But you need to come up to the podium and state your name, though, for the record. So the first one we'll do is, I'm not sure how to say that, Babic for a CUP for a home occupation on 1 acre parcel. This property is out in Sweet Clover Acre, second edition subdivision out in Farron Township. Sam, anything on this one?
Good evening, Commissioners. Sam Miller with County Planning and Zoning. Just a few additional items to note. So we did not receive township comment on this project. A little bit about the home occupation. So the home occupation will be to conduct services for firearms and ammunition business. The applicant is in the process of obtaining an FFL through the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. The applicant has stated nearly all business will be conducted online and or off-site. The applicant is not anticipating more traffic than would generally be expected in a residential subdivision. No inventory will be stored on-site. The only conditions that Planning and Zoning is recommending are to adhere to our county zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations moving forward, and that all requirements of the home occupations chapter of the ordinance be followed.
Okay, any questions for Sam? If not, I'll open up the hearing. This is a public hearing. Is there any public input? Any public input? Last time, any public input? I'll close the hearing. What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve following staff comments.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Dan?
Dan?
Yes, thank you.
Barry?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Louise?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Shane?
Yes.
Tate?
Yes, motion carries. Next item, we have Eric Schiffler for a conditional use permit for a single-family dwelling. This property is currently zoned agriculture, and it's out in Judson Township. Sam, anything on this one?
Just some additional information. So the township did recommend approval with some additional comments. Their comments were related to more of procedural comments, so they were questioning whether this was going to be a variance as opposed to a conditional use permit. This is permitted through a conditional use permit in this zoning district for an additional house, so that's the procedure that we do use. I explained this to the chairman and he was on board with this. Just a little bit more about the project. So there is an existing old schoolhouse on there. The previous resident converted that into a residence. They now also want to convert this into a schoolhouse / guest room for their family and friends. And then there's an existing pole barn that they want to convert into a residence. So in total, there will be 2 residences on the property. Didn't seem like the township had any issue when we didn't receive any additional adjacent landowner comment on this project. There are 3 division comments listed in your packet to adhere to our zoning ordinance and subdivision. Construction needs to be started within 18 months, so construction on that second dwelling. And then completion of the current minor re-subdivision process. They're also working through re-subdivision to correct, there was a boundary line adjustment issue with this parcel.
Okay, any questions for Sam?
Sam, the building department's good with residents and the pole barn stuff?
Correct, so they will have to, so this kind of got triggered through the building department process, so they were trying to come into compliance with our building code. There hasn't been any issues so far.
So in their question about whether a variance would be better than a CUP is any thoughts on that or?
So typically a variance is a variance from our regulations. So our regulations don't either specify or they're trying to vary from what's required, some of our requirements. So the additional dwelling is a listed use as a conditional use permit. And so that's why we take it through the conditional use permit process for the additional dwelling on the home.
Okay, any
Sam,
other,
it seems like we talked about this before. Doesn't a CUP go with the individual?
Correct.
So if he goes to sell it, the building's already there, it's built?
Right, so in theory, if he sells the property, the next owner of the property would have to also apply for a conditional use permit if they wanted to use both residences on the property.
Doesn't that kind of commit a hindrance for selling?
Well, that's what I was getting. Would not a variance be a better suit?
Possibly, and that's something that we as staff can definitely explore.
like explore prior to the next county commission meeting?
Probably not. I think we might need to do a little bit more research on that.
Would it be appropriate if we made our motion, if we decide to approve it, we change it to a variance, or is that a completely different paperwork, Sam?
I think that might be different. It might be different process and it's different evaluation criteria that we had applied to this project.
Could we allow that if this goes through, just allow that change to go through administratively if we find that that's the more appropriate designation for this property? Because I think there's several properties in the county that have this similar like situation, I think.
Definitely. We have this come up quite frequently.
Yeah.
I just see it being a real hindrance when you go to sell it to somebody else if there's a CUP on it. We don't know that they're going to get the CUP once they buy it.
Right, so the CUP does follow the applicant, so yeah, you're correct.
We've had quite a few of the requests on the 40-acre parcel of 2 homes. So I think it is something we should look into just for the homeowners.
Yeah, we can definitely do that as staff.
If I may just add a little history on the reason why that became a CUP process is during the peak of things, we had a lot of properties that were just building numerous. We'd have an 80-acre parcel with 3, 4, 5 homes on it without subdividing. And so that was a way the county was able to control a little better to find out exactly where they're putting these homes, if they meet certain setbacks, certain requirements. And that's why we had followed that process. Not saying times don't change and things can be updated, but that was one of the reasons why this was a CUP. And our ordinances were specific at the time of 1 home per parcel. So that was a little better way for us to control it during that time when things were just going nuts. Yeah. So.
Any other questions for her? Okay, if not, I'll open up the hearing. This is a public hearing. Is there any public input? Any public input? Third and final time, any public input? Close the hearing. What are the wishes of the board?
Please.
Yep, go ahead, you're on.
Thank you. Who's living in the other house then? The original owner?
No, so Mr. Schiffler has purchased the property. His main residence is going to be in the pole barn that was on the property, so I believe they've already started the process of converting that into the main residence. And then the schoolhouse, which was converted into a residence by the previous owner, that is going to be their like on-site school for their children. And so like their homeschool kind of thing, and a guest house for like family members who are visiting the property, from my understanding. So they're not gonna have two separate families living in there permanently. It's just two residences because it's converted that way through building regulations.
If it was,
Thanks.
if it was a guest house and someone wasn't living in it permanently, why would it be considered two residences?
So the way that the structure has been updated through building regulations, it's considered a residence because it has to get a certificate of occupancy in order for someone to live in it, whether they live in it one day or 365 days out of the year. And that's kind of how we go off of basing what's a residence and what's not a residence, is if it has a certificate of occupancy.
Okay, any other questions? Okay,
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve it with staff comment.
is there a second?
Make the second.
We have a second with staff comments. Is there any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Chris,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Adam,
Yes.
Sherelle,
Yes,
Dan, Shane,
Yes.
Barry,
Yes.
Tate.
Yes, motion carries. Next item, Peter Andre for a variance to allow construction of an accessory structure that is not incidental to a permitted primary use. Property is currently zoned agriculture, and this is out in Scorio Township. Sam, anything on this one?
Just a few comments. So the township had no comment. The township board did not provide any comment on this project. The variance would be for an accessory structure that's not related to any agricultural use. So this property is within the agricultural zoning district. Typically, we do not regulate any agricultural related structures on agriculturally zoned properties because it fits the use and they don't require a building permit if they're just going to be for storage. So this one is not related to agricultural storage. It's going to be for personal storage. And so that's why he's applying for this variance from our regulations to have just the accessory structure. No home will be on there. There won't be any primary use. So just a building for his things.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Any questions for?
I gotta ask, just because he's a farmer, he has to come in? If he was a farmer, he wouldn't have to?
So if he was storing agriculturally related things, materials, tractors, etc., it would be a permitted use, but because he wants to store his personal things, it then changes the use of the structure.
All right, any other questions? I'm gonna open up the hearing. This is a public hearing. Is there any public input? Any public input? Last time, any public input? Close the hearing. What are the comments or the wishes of the board?
Motion to approve.
With staff comments,
Yes, please.
is there a second to that?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Barry,
Yes.
Shane,
Yes.
Dan, Sherelle,
yes,
Adam, Louise,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Tate.
Yes, motion carries. On to the next. Ed is looking for a zone change to rural residential for a proposed 21 acre parcel. It's currently zoned agriculture, and it's out in East Fork Township. Sam, anything on this one?
As you can see in the staff packet, the township did recommend denial. They had provided some comment. I had followed up with the chairman just regarding his comment. His comment was that after discussion with landowners in the township, none were in favor of this subdivision. So I just wanted to follow up to see if we could understand the comment a little bit more. The chairman had stated that residents in the area were just concerned with the additional residential development in the area. So that was their comment. We do have 2 division comments. So the first is to just adhere to zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations, and then second is completion of the minor subdivision process. So this parent parcel is being subdivided, hence the zone change to rural residential. The subdivision will create a parcel that's roughly 21 acres out of the 160 acre parent parcel.
Okay, any questions for Sam on this one?
In our last meeting, in one of the last few meetings, we had a comment around flagged parcels. Is that an issue in this case?
Yeah, it was a couple meetings ago, it was on that stuff near Trenton, if I recall, up north.
Right. Yes. So typically this has to be approved by the director. In this case, so in the last case, if you remember, there were other residences in the area. So it posed a bit of a safety concern when you create these flag lots, you can't see the homes back behind the other residences in the area. Since this is going into a rural residential zoning district, as you can see from the map, there are no homes really close to the vicinity of this flag lot, so we didn't see it as an issue in this case.
Sam, there's something I'm missing. It's just one residence. It doesn't even look like anybody close to him. Why would the township be against? It sounds like they're overpopulating or something, the way they make it sound.
Right, and that was kind of what I was inquiring about with the chairman, and he had just met with residents in the area, and the township board's comments were reflective of the residents who were not in favor of this project.
Okay, any other questions for Sam? Okay, I'm gonna open up the hearing. This is a public hearing. Any public input on this one? Any public input? Third time, any public input? I'm gonna close the hearing. Comments, wishes from the board? Ed, I hate to put you on the spot, Ed, I hate to put you on the spot. Do you know what they're looking to do, or what? Or there's some dissension, or?
Good evening, Commissioners. Ed Rindemaki, 49th Latitude Land Survey. This project is simply taking, like you can see on the map, there a 21 acre parcel out of the southwest or southeast quarter of Section 17 for a single family residence. The client is planning to build his home there, and essentially that's all that's happening with the project. And I don't know if there'd be any other comments for me, or questions, I should say.
Nope, that's good. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Ed, have you met with the township, or did the landowner meet with the township or anything yet, or it just went to the township? Has anybody talked to them?
I talked to the township chairman, it would have been after he received the packet from staff, and he just simply related to me that there was, like was already stated, residents had called in opposition to it, and that's why the letter was submitted as denying. So I don't know if the township chairman is here, if he's able to give any insight into it, or, but that's simply all it is creating a 21 acre rural residential parcel for client to build a house.
Any other questions? Thanks, Ed. Thank you. Okay. Comments, wishes?
Tate, is there an option to send it back to the township? Would that be the best way to go and get further comments? Or was that already covered? I couldn't-
No, we certainly could. In discussion, it doesn't appear that they're in favor of any residential dwellings out in that area.
I guess I'm
Yeah.
with Dan. I hate to go against the township, so I mean, to me, there's gotta be a reason for it. I would like to let the homeowners talk to them or something, if nobody's talked to them after they met with their board.
Yeah,
Yeah, we all feel the same way about going against their wishes, so I will make a motion to table it, and either they go back to the township, or if they don't wanna do that, I'll call them, find out what the reasoning is.
yeah, we can, okay, is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Okay, so for discussion, Dan, if you want to try to reach out, you go right ahead. If you can't get a hold of him, let me know. It's Rick Sorensen's who it is.
Yep,
Okay,
I can do that.
okay, we have a motion and a second to table it. Is there any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mark,
Yes.
Louise,
Yes.
Adam,
Yes.
Sherelle,
Yes.
Dan, Chris,
Yes.
Shane,
Yes.
Tate.
Yes, motion carries. Okay, Dan, you can follow up, then just let staff know.
Yep, I will.
Thank you. All right, next one on the agenda, Wisco for a CUP amendment to include T-Norm waste disposal in existing special waste landfill for a 103 acre parcel. It's currently zoned industrial. It's out in Round Prairie Township. Sam? Wait.
Before we start, I'd just like to comment, Round Prairie Township didn't receive notice of this prior. I don't know where it went, but we didn't get it. I didn't even know about it until a week ago.
I sent it to your email on May 6th.
Well, it might have been in there someplace, but I didn't, usually I get them in the mail. And so consequently, Round Prairie Township did not consider the item 4, 5, or 6 at our last meeting. Just so you know that. That's why you have no comments from us.
Okay, thanks, Cheryl. Okay, yep, go ahead, Sam.
Okay, so as Mr. Chairman had mentioned, the existing conditional use permit that was applied for by Wisco was granted approval on May 7, 2013 for the purpose of a special waste landfill, which is currently what they operate. The request for a conditional use amendment is to include the disposal of technologically enhanced naturally occurring radioactive material, or T-Norm, as you'll become familiar with that acronym. The waste of T-Norm will not exceed 50 picocuries per gram of radium-226 plus radium-228 at the existing landfill. So I don't want to go too much in depth, so I'll just wait for your questions. But the existing conditions of this site, so this is currently within the industrial zoning district. Industrial is an old zoning classification. So next on the agenda will be a staff-initiated update to heavy industrial. So this will eventually be updated to heavy industrial just to bring the zoning district into conformance with the existing use. A little bit about the conditional use permit history. So the amendment to this, an application was submitted by Wisco back in 2019. In December of 2019, the Board of County Commission placed a moratorium on all pending and future zoning applications and permits for T-Norm facilities or disposal of T-Norm. So the purpose of this moratorium was for staff and the commission to learn a little bit more about what T-Norm is and how it may possibly affect the community, reaching out to organizations and businesses that deal with T-Norm. So the moratorium had expired May 1st, and applications for the disposal of T-Norm were accepted then the day after. Staff, like I mentioned, we did some due diligence and reached out to the Department of Environmental Quality, who is in the audience today. So you'll see included in the staff packet, we had asked them a bunch of questions. There's 2 divisions that work with the disposal of T-norm, and they were really helpful and very responsive to our questions. So those questions, like I said, are outlined in your packet. Staff also went ahead and commented on some of the CUP evaluation criteria that we have listed in our ordinance, so you'll see that. So we have commented based on the 7 criteria that that CUPs are evaluated under. Planning and Zoning Division has recommended 5 comments. The first is our standard one, to adhere to all zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations. So basically, if WISCO were to change anything other than what was originally applied for, they would have to come back to this commission and then finally the county commission. The use shall comply with all state and federal regulations and all local fire zoning and other applicable ordinances, codes, rules, and regulations. Number 3, the CUP is contingent upon the applicant receiving approval from North Dakota Department of Environmental Quality and the Waste Management for radioactive materials license and solid waste management permits and other associated state approvals if required. 4, following approval from the DEQ to accept T-norm waste, they are limited to the state limit of 50 picocuries per gram with a limit of 25,000 tons per year and no more than 3,000 tons in any 1 month. So that's the current cap that the state allows for. So if, for whatever reason, if T-norm, the ability to accept T-norm gets increased to beyond 50 picocuries, they would have to come back to the commission and request approval for that amendment. And then 5, install a trackout pad from each approach onto Highway 2. This was a recommendation by the Department of Transportation. I had spoken with a representative from the Department of Transportation a few weeks back, and he did mention that that was something that he'd like to see on both sides. So they have 2 access points, one's north of the highway and one south of the highway, and so he recommended that a trackout pad be installed on both approaches. And so unless you have any specific questions, I know a bunch of people from DEQ are here, and the applicant and their representative, I believe, is also in the audience if you have really specific questions around T-norm. And then in relation to the township comment, since that wasn't, you didn't have the ability to review this prior, we can possibly send out the township again. I'm not sure how you'd want that to be handled. I apologize for that.
I would mail them out and make sure that they get them. Because this obviously impacts that township more than
Correct.
us over here, so.
And then when we had the moratorium on it, WDEA was they were supposed to kind of sit down and come up with some guidelines for us to go by. Have they ever, so I've never heard anything back from them. Did they ever come up with any suggestions or anything like that?
They may be here this evening. We didn't have any, wouldn't say official suggestions, but they were to do a study, and they had released some more information about the process itself. But no, there is no official information that they had given us. They helped facilitate a lot of the meetings through us and the DEQ and also the Department of Mineral Resources. We've had a lot of Zoom call meetings about it, just trying to figure things out, but I don't have anything specific from them.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions for Sam at this time?
Sam, do you remember on this original project, was there a cleanup bond in place at that time? Was anything ever put down?
For the original landfill application, not through the county. So the zone change was in 2012 and the CUP was 2013. Yeah, so, and then our newest ordinance, the ordinance that we abide by now, was adopted in 2015.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Okay, any other questions for Sam at this time? Because we'll certainly come back. I know we'll have questions when we're done, or comments. Okay. Before I hit the gavel, I know there's a lot of you in this room that are here tonight specifically for this one, and obviously up in Blacktail in that area. I'm not gonna let you talk amongst each other, or go back and forth on top of each other and get into argument and debate. Keep it professional the best you can. If you can't, step away, take a deep breath, come back up. But I don't want this to get the emotion side of things and start disrupting what we're trying to accomplish. But if you wish to speak again, come up to the podium and state your name and we'll go from there. With that being said, I'm gonna open up the hearing. This is a public hearing. Who would like to come up to speak on this one? I can't imagine you're gonna sit there. You've come a long way for this.
I just wanted to add to, the applicant may have a small presentation they were mentioned earlier.
Oh, sure. If they, yeah, yep. Come on up, Janice. You can go ahead. And then if you guys have a presentation, you want to present it, absolutely go for it.
Hi, I am Janice Arnson. I am a landowner, not specifically in the in the township that Wisco is in, but close by. I guess I just want to say I really am opposed to seeing this go in. I feel like our area has taken so much on with the oil impact, and I just hate to see this come in addition to it. We have so many unintended consequences that have happened because of the oil. And, you know, even tonight in the paper, I see with the pipeline, the Custers have something that happened, an avoidance, I think it was, because of the pipeline being built too close to their home. And it was something that wasn't meant to happen, but it's discovered, I think, 6 years later. And I just wonder about things like that happen, no fault of anyone's, probably it wasn't intended, but what will happen because of this, an unintended consequence. And we have our children and our grandchildren here, and I worry about the radioactivity, even though they say it's safe. At what point will they come back and decide, or the health department will say, we made a mistake, it's not a safe level. And I worry about that, and them coming back and asking for a greater amount to be disposed upon. So I really hate to see this happen. The other thing that I want to point out is that because our area has taken on so much of the oil here, we have given revenue to Bismarck to be disseminated to the rest of the state. And that is all fine and good, but I think we have not realized the impact that we have needed to rebuild our area like we should have. And I think this is something that somewhere else in the state could take. They could take a disposal of this. Like Bismarck is not that far, and they have the minefield, the coal minefields that maybe could take this as a disposal dump for this. So let them do their part and take this. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Dan and Chris, we just said we have individuals coming up here to do a quick presentation.
I'll introduce myself while we're getting the PowerPoint pulled up. My name is Paul Swenson. I work for Barr Engineering Company, and we're employed by Wisco to help them with, we've worked with them for the last 10 years since they started with the landfill and the other facilities they have out in this, at this location. And there's a host of others right behind me here. I'll let them introduce themselves. They're both from Wisco and another consultant.
Lynn Thompson, I'm a senior civil engineer also with Barr Engineering. Thank you for having us here tonight. Stuart Sund, Area Sales Manager for Wisco Incorporated.
Louis Vegan, Operations Manager for Integrity Environmental.
Kayla Emmons, Facility Manager for Wisco.
See here. Quick background on Wisco as a company. Wisco has been in operation in the Williston Basin since 1968. Currently, we employ roughly 145 people throughout the Bakken area. We are owned by Omni Environmental Solutions. They provide our financial and technical backing. Our local management team has very deep roots within the community and the county. Next slide, please. Chuck Moline, our general manager, is a 65-year resident of Williston and Williams County. He currently has 44 years of employment at Wisco Incorporated. Kevin Cole, our divisions manager, operations associate, 55-year resident of Williams County and a 26-year employee of Wisco. John Norby, production service lead. He's a 43-year resident of Williams County and a 20-year employer at Wisco. Myself, the area sales manager, I have 25 years of residence in Williams County and 7 years of employment at Wisco. In addition to oil field and trucking services, Wisco owns and operates waste management facilities such as saltwater well, waste liquids treating plant, and our special waste landfill. Wisco saw a need to manage North Dakota waste within North Dakota. Our landfill is regulated, permitted, inspected by the North Dakota Department of Environmental Quality. Landfill design complies with strict North Dakota DEQ rules specifically prepared for TNORM landfills. We endure rigorous monthly DEQ inspections. We'll let Paul take it from here.
Next few slides anyway. So the landfill is about 18 miles west of Williston, very close to the Montana border. Pretty rural area, not too many residents in the area. Next slide. This slide shows the proposed and current and proposed footprint of the existing landfill that has been permitted by the state for disposal of oil field waste. It's divided into 4 cells. This slide shows the current status or near current status. Cell 1 has been constructed and is receiving waste. The development of the landfill will progress to the west as it develops. We have a monitoring well system to track groundwater quality. We have not detected any impacts to groundwater quality to this point from the presence of the landfill or the leachate pond. We're proposing to put air quality monitors in place on all 4 sides and also what's called a gateway monitor on the entrance of the driveway to scan incoming truckloads for radioactive levels to ensure that the incoming waste meets the requirements. The driveway, there will be improvements done to the driveway that will provide a paved surface with cattle guards, cattle crossings to get the mud to drop off the trucks before leaving the site onto Highway 2. The facility provides multiple levels of protection to the environment and to the public. One of the most important ones is North Dakota has written their rules well to only allow landfills in areas where there are low permeability soils. Water does not move quickly through any of these materials that you can see on our geologic section here. The volcanic tuff in the bottom is a little unusual. It's a volcanic ash material. It's also low permeability material that inhibits or slows down groundwater movement. And we're separated, there's a separation of 6 feet minimum from the bottom of the landfill to the groundwater table. Our modeling has indicated it would take 10,000 years for any leakage that we don't expect to occur, but if anything did happen, it would take 10,000 years to get from the bottom of the landfill to the groundwater table. Next slide, please. The scientific modeling, yes, it leads to that conclusion. We have gone out and measured the actual permeability of the ash or the volcanic tuff at the bottom of the base of the landfill. So we've measured that, and then there are standardized accepted formulas for calculating the time duration for a molecule of water or whatever, however you want to quantify it, to get through that distance.
This is a blanket deal, or this is exactly on the land you have out there? You've done the test on that one?
Yes, yeah, we tested that particular soil. There's some groundwater virtually everywhere. Everywhere in North Dakota, there's some groundwater somewhere, yes. So yes, it is above, there's water there's a coal bed seam below the landfill that provides a conduit for groundwater flow. So it's not a drinking water aquifer.
But into, okay, so there's some water underneath of it. Would that connect somewhere else? Like, how does that work underneath? I mean, essentially, can it leak into another area is basically what I'm asking. Because this is extremely thought out. Are there other ways to kind of regulate that water underground? Would that be something you guys would need to do from your study?
Well, what's up on the slide right now, shows that next layer of protection. There's a very thick compacted clay layer and a plastic membrane and a leachate collection layer. So I'm sorry, I'm kind of trying to do my best to address your question. There is very little chance that any water is leaking out of that landfill, or it's very, very small quantities. Whatever does get to, if there was anything that would get to the aquifer, or not at the aquifer, but that groundwater that's down in the coal seam, it does move somewhere eventually. I don't know exactly where this ends up. It's down, 100 feet below ground surface.
In a way, I feel like these are basic questions, but to the community who are not versed in, there's the questions arise. Man, I almost just forgot it. So yeah, if it goes into the water and what was it, 50, the level of 50, if it goes down and if it hits the water to spread, is there any way that it gets diluted or it loses, its effectiveness at that point?
Yes, there certainly would be a significant degree of dilution. We also have the groundwater monitoring wells are situated to intercept potential pathways, and we monitor those twice a year. We collect samples, have them analyzed for all of those parameters. Lynn will address that a little bit more later. To this point, we have not seen any indication of any sort of leakage from the landfill. So this is the liner system, as I was indicating, and this is kind of the minimum section. Down at the bottom in the volcanic tuff area, we actually have another 18 inches of compacted clay besides this. And this is the cover system that would be installed. It's a 5-foot thick cover system, again with a compacted clay layer and then another low permeability soil. Any team norm materials would have to be at least 5 feet below the bottom of this cover section. The material between the T-norm and the cover is just normal, typical oil field waste material.
So when you bring your T-norm in, do you blend it out? You know, like one truckload to a truckload of, of clean dirt or clean clay or dirt? So you can, 'cause I know you can blend the stuff out. So do you blend it ahead of time before you put it in? So it's, basically, I mean, just for rough math, it would be blended down to a 25 picocurie level and then covered, or?
I wouldn't expect blending before placement. It will be spread on the landfill surface, and there will be some mixing as it's spread out. There is a limit to how much of the material the landfill accepts can be T-norm. The majority still has to be typical oil field waste. Do you recall the numbers you're getting, truckloads you're getting? 25
a day.
So 25 a day of typical oil field waste, and then there will be not more than 3 truckloads, on average, not more than 3 truckloads a day of T-norm material. So it's about a 10-to-1 ratio almost.
Sure, but then, I mean, I didn't really mean when I meant blend as in, put it in a bowl or, but I mean, you'll put a layer in and then a layer of, the next clean-ish truck cuttings or whatever comes in and.
Yes, it will need to be covered, I believe it's daily, isn't it? Every day. Yeah, every day.
When you put this plastic liner on, does that get covered with dirt right away then? Or how do you keep it, if you're driving on it, how do you keep it from getting ripped and tore and everything else?
Very carefully, yes. That there, on top of the plastic liner, there is in this particular facility, there is what we call a geocomposite. It's a thick geotextile material that is sandwiches around a geogrid, a plastic grid that collects the leachate that drips through the waste and moves it to the leachate collection system. That's a very tough material that protects it. And on top of that, we carefully place another 1 to 2 foot thick layer of protective soil material on top of that, soil or ash or something else that will protect the membrane.
So it's your membrane and then 2 foot of material and then your waste goes on top of that?
Yes.
And there's only one layer of plastic in this whole deal, or you several layers of plastic as you go?
It's one at the bottom. That will intercept the leachate and then divert it into the leachate collection system. Next slide, please. Much of the material, the T-norm material that will go into the landfill is actually from their treating plant, their more liquidy waste treating plant on the north side of the road. So that will constitute a lot of the waste quantity that will go into the landfill. So that's just a matter of taking the material across across Highway 2 into the landfill. Some of the waste stream that's already going to the treating plant will get diverted from the plant to the landfill because it's of a quality that the landfill can receive. So a lot of the traffic is already built into what WISCO is currently doing. Commercial loads that are coming in, of course, would travel along Highway 2 and have to turn into the landfill. As I mentioned before, we'll be also upgrading the driveway with pavement and cattle guards to reduce mud issues on the highway. Louis, I think this one is yours.
I just want to say I'm a resident of North Dakota, been all my life, 45 years, a resident of Williston. WISCO asked me to come in to be a third-party independent auditor and them to give them oversight from an outside source. So I'm not a employee of WISCO. I have an environmental company, and putting my name behind WISCO and my reputation as an environmental specialist, I'm taking that chance. But from what I've seen in their procedures, their guidance, the engineering background, I back them. My history with radioactive materials goes half my life. I've done 10 years in the Navy. I've operated on nuclear reactors, literally doing maintenance on naval submarines, sleeping between nuclear warheads. I have a degree in nuclear engineering. I've always been from North Dakota. My kids are raised here. My son's in the Navy. Someday I'll anticipate him taking over this environmental company. So I just wanted to let you know, I take this very seriously. I will hold WISCO to a military standard higher than what the state will. It's what I've been trained on half my life. I've worked as a regulator for the state of North Dakota for 3 years before I came out to the Bakken here 8 years ago. Like I said, I'm a homeowner in Williston. I'm readily available to them. I've dealt with all types of situations with regards to T-norm, burn downs of well sites and everything. So I'm always at the disposal of WISCO, of the community, and I ain't going anywhere. I just want to talk about a little bit of the monitoring of the waste. So we're putting up over $100,000 to go above and beyond from public comments where how will you know this is below the levels to how do you know the trucks will be clean? How will the air meet the standards? We have all the equipment to do that. We have the top of the line technology that we're going to spend to make sure that these areas are safe. We're open to working with the local residents to always give them some training, some education, some understanding of the word radiation, of the words radioactive materials. So I will be at the disposal of the community, of the residents, any time to answer questions, to sit down, to take that time at no cost to them. The waste volumes that we'll be allowed to take, like we said, it's an average of 3 trucks, about 75 tons a day, compared to 25 truckloads of non-impacted waste. We will have the technology besides analytical. We will have backups, portal monitors to assure even the analytical is double checked. Everything will be set in stone first before trucks show up and they just want to dump this waste. We'll have backups to make sure they don't just drive away and decide to find some illegal way to do it. We have the waste plant already licensed just to the north side of the road, so we'll handle any contingencies that may occur. The training, I would give training to numerous big oil companies. I've been doing training for 10 years with the Navy and out here in the Bakken. Comprehensive sampling and characteristics of the truckloads. Like I said, we'll have $100,000 in equipment. That, our records will not be hidden from anybody. We'll be open to that. We'll share those. We'll explain the science behind it. We just want this to be open and honest. Like I said, that'll be my promise to the residents of Williams County and Williston. And like I said, we have a local company right out of Watford City to conduct analytical sampling. Will be done by myself to make sure that everything is professional.
So I didn't mean to interrupt you. So have you been here 10 years in the Bakken or 8 years in the Bakken?
8 years in the Bakken.
Okay.
I served 10 years in the Navy.
Okay.
And then 3 years as a regulator.
How long have you been? Were you like born and raised in Williams County?
Newtown, North Dakota.
Okay. Okay.
But
I just want to make sure we're
Yeah.
on the same page because I heard a couple different dates.
Yep. So this is just a picture of our gate monitor. This is used by companies like Pacific Steel, which is a recycling company. They absolutely can have zero T-norm because eventually it builds up when they're doing the smelting process of their metals. So this is, a $50,000 piece of equipment which we'll have installed prior to accepting waste. Because there was concerns and comments about leaving it up to human error, walking around with a smaller handheld meter. This technology will eliminate the human error in that. So this is just a picture and example of what one looks like. If you'd like to go look at one, like I said, Pacific Steel has one. This thing will catalog everything of incoming waste to the landfill, and to also scan the trucks out as they exit to ensure they're free of T-norm. Next slide. Contaminated equipment. Yep. This monitor will also monitor any contaminated equipment like pipe, tanks, anything like that besides soils. There's set points that'll be set and calculated by myself and a number of health physicists with the equipment that's being installed. And of course, without saying we'll comply, obviously within those maximum levels. If there's any variance, we'll always fail at a lower level. Air monitoring will be conducted above and beyond. We are moving up. We are gonna get 4 air monitors. They'll be running continuously 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We'll be monitoring for radium-226, 228, and radon. And this annual report will be given to the DEQ, which is, we may or may not know, state records are open to the public. We're an open record state. Thank you.
Can I ask a question real quick to you? Go ahead. What other areas in the state allow this, or what other states even allow this type of product?
T-norm?
Yes.
Well, Montana has a facility there near Glendive. It's in Lindsay, Montana. Colorado, Illinois. The state of Illinois actually does land spreading of T-norm, where it's actually legal for them to take T-norm and spread it in the land, obviously kind of naturally diluting that. Just a number. Texas doesn't have any limit at all. There's no maximum limit. Texas can take that because I've utilized them numerous times to take levels that are in the tens of thousands of picocuries per gram.
Yes, thank you.
Well, I have a question on that too. So I guess, like soil-wise, obviously the long-term effects is probably the biggest question. When you say radioactive, that is a huge
Sure.
flag. When, again, knowing the 50 is a very low level, but the fear is the long-term effects. So when you say you guys are trucking out to Montana now, is there any way comparison to their soil, our soil, to be able to see long-term effects?
With these amounts and the potential for dilution factor and the fact that we are drying this material, it's not going to be wet, it's sloppy, it has to pass a paint filter test. That seepage is minimal. There was a study conducted by Argonne National Laboratories that came out. If you're not familiar with it, it's on the DEQ website that talks about that.
And just to clarify, are there any T-norm landfills in North Dakota currently, or would this be the first one?
No, there are no T-norm landfills in North Dakota, just processing facilities.
So is all our radioactive material then going to the Montana facility
It
currently?
depends. Montana has a limit of 50 picocuries per gram, like we're asking for. It can go to Colorado, which has higher limits, Idaho, Texas. After it goes above 50 picocuries, it could be able to be accepted in Montana.
Question, you haul in 3 truckloads of 50 pico, whatever. So 50, 50, 50, is it up to 150 now? Or does it always maintain 50 no matter how much you put on top of it?
No, picocuries per gram, it's a concentration. It's just like how much sugar's in your soda. For every can of soda, you have like 40 grams of sugar, correct? It doesn't change if you mix 2 cans of soda together. Obviously, you're taking more, but the concentration itself does not double or triple in that aspect. Does that answer your question, sir? Okay.
Again, with that question, so at what point does it become detrimental to the people in the area? Like, where is that kind of leaking into affecting the grandkids, affecting the community?
What level?
So if it's per gram, like per
Right.
truckload coming in, like the example of
Right.
the soda, is there a certain level where this can become a health problem to the surrounding area?
Not at 50 picocuries per gram. Now, approximately for, if you were to measure a side dump of 50 picocuries per gram, you're gonna be at about 60 microrankin per hour. Now, that's 10 to the -6, so a millionth. The government says you can have up to 2,000 millirem, so that's to the 1,000. So you're a thousandth of that fraction that even the federal government allows for exposure from that.
Do you happen to know how, there's a slurry well in McKenzie County that just got going?
Yes.
Is there a limit to what they can handle, or is that, I mean, whatever they can get shoved down whole, or I mean, is it, are they limited to 50 also?
My
Do you know?
understanding
Not
is-
that, I was just curious, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not really relevant, I
To
guess.
my understanding, without speaking for them, there's no limit what you can put down hole, but they probably do have a licensing limit of what they can actually have above ground on their site. Yes, sir. Yeah, no problem.
Okay, I don't know if you're the one to ask or not, but I'll bring it up now. So we run into a worst-case scenario like the other night where we get 4, 5, 6 inches of rain. You've got this thing with plastic liners and clay. I mean, that can only hold so much water. What happens when that hits the top of this berm and starts running out on the land?
Water?
Is it,
Maybe I'm out of place.
no, that's fine. We're welcoming your questions. It's a good question. That's just not an acceptable occasion to have happen. If anything started running out on the ground, the DEQ would be there and we would start seeing fines, I think. We have a leachate pond that is constructed on the site that's built to hold 3 back-to-back 100-year storms. So that's about 9 inches of rainfall without evaporation. It's designed to evaporate over time. I know that Wisco has also been pumping some water out of that pond and hauling it to for disposal elsewhere, as permitted, so that we make sure we do not ever get in a position of having an overflow or discharge of leachate out onto the ground. That's just one of the principles of landfill operations. It's a very serious issue. We take it seriously, and we take every precaution that we can to make sure it doesn't. If you have a biblical flood, it's hard to design for that, but we've prepared a very rigorous design as required by the DEQ.
Okay, when you talk about evaporation then, is there any problem with airborne materials as this dries out in the water?
Louis might be able to help answer that, but since we're going to be doing air monitoring as well, there shouldn't be anything really drying out. It's because we'll always want to have some water in the bottom of that pond. We need the weight to keep, again, that's a plastic lined pond. We need the weight of that water to keep the plastic down in the pond so it doesn't blow away. So it's not ever going to go completely dry. So, there's always water there to keep all the solids moist and wet and suspended in the water column. Anything that could volatilize is, we have the air monitors to keep track of that. Any other thoughts?
No. The air monitoring will cover that.
So do you also test the leachate water itself? Is there, I mean, can you see a correlation between what's in the landfill and then what the leachate water is? I mean, is that, I'm assuming they work, hand in hand?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That's why it's called leachate. It's what the water that percolates through the waste leaches through the waste, and it will pick up things from the waste as it makes its way down. We do monitor that water as well as the groundwater, and we monitor other surface water too. We analyze for the constituents that you would expect to see from the waste, and the radioactive elements will be among those constituents.
Yeah, I can speak a bit more to the groundwater monitoring program. I'm the BAR project manager for WISCO. On the groundwater monitoring program, to me, it's one of the most important ways that we can ensure that the public is safeguarded. It's the DEQ's best way of making sure that facilities are run properly. So we have 5 monitoring wells at the location. Those 5 spots we test twice a year, plus the leachate pond gets tested as well. There's a ton of analytes. I think the list is 3 pages long with a 12 font. Some of the most important ones are obviously radium-226 and radium-228. When it comes to T-norm, and then TPH, benzene, typical oil field type things. So those are, again, they're twice a year we collect the samples. They are submitted to a state-regulated lab or a state-approved lab. And then once a year we submit an annual report to the DEQ. One of those monitoring wells is upstream, so you kind of were asking a little bit about groundwater movement. The groundwater there doesn't move really fast. The only way we know that is you have to take water out of a groundwater well when you're monitoring it. They don't recharge very well. Sometimes we have to sit and wait to get more water, to sample more water. So movement is slow. We do know that it's to the southwest, the south and the west, or the south and the east, excuse me. So we have 1 monitoring well up to the north. That's kind of how we look at background levels. The other 4 wells, we can compare the levels in that well in those wells to the leachate pond and the background well, and that kind of gives you a picture of what's, if there are any issues. We haven't seen any issues with, groundwater degradation or anything in our, we've been sampling since 2014, I believe. So, and then in addition to that, we also do surface water monitoring. They have a SWIP plan out there, which is Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan. There's not a lot of surface water runoff out there, even with your storm last week. There's really none, but that is looked at as well. Next slide, please. And then in addition to that, once they do start accepting T-norm, they will be inspecting roads. That'll be added onto their monthly inspection checklist, making sure that there's no T-norm tracking of any sort. I think that will be one of Lewis's tasks, is to go out there with the monitor and kind of walk around anywhere trucks can go and make sure that everything looks good. And then those records would be maintained for a minimum of 3 years, which is pretty typical for environmental things. The DEQ also has rigorous oversight. They come unannounced. They do monthly inspections. Anything that they find, they'll write that up. And the NDIC also has some oversight as well out there. Is there any other groundwater monitoring stuff?
One more quick question.
Yeah.
Has there been any history of environmental problems around these T-norm facilities throughout the country? I don't know if you're the right person to ask or something.
I actually don't, I guess I don't know specifically. My previous employer, we did an audit on a few of those facilities for one of our clients, and we didn't find anything of concern. We would have been fine with our clients disposing of waste there. But beyond that, I don't have any knowledge. You do, Lewis?
I haven't personally dealt with it. It comes down to really the management and the oversight that the management has, if they have outside sources. I've conducted full site remediations. I've given what's called a decommissioning funding plan for sites. And for the site for WISCO, the decommissioning funding plan for their plant just north of there is approximately $650,000 for a full remediation, which they have a bond with the state that's held, not just with the NDIC, but the Radiation Control Program for the DEQ. So that's required to be done by an outside source, that decommissioning funding plan, to say, this is the worst case scenario if every tank was full at maximum capacity. If trucks were driving and they tracked up everything, the state requires us to go down, 15 centimeters. It's impacted, so they're taking, come hell or high water, if Wisco just packed up in the middle of the night or whoever it might be, this can be remediated for this cost. They're required for that. Okay.
I have another question, because some of that, it sounds good, but a lot of it's Greek, because this is certainly not in my wheelhouse of expertise by any way, shape, of the imagination. Why are other states not jumping on something like this? Why does only 4, 5, 6 states have this, are willing to take this on?
I guess that just comes down to, everything comes down to finances, right? Some things are more profitable for companies with liability to take on a responsibility of a landfill, especially when you deal with higher things of industrial waste, hazardous materials, whatever the case might be. Like I said, Yucca Mountain in Arizona dealing with, uranium-235, which is from a reactor. Why wouldn't more people? It's big money, of course, but there's always liabilities in those cases. So the companies that have the financial backing, that know that the process works, more companies would be doing this if they had the knowledge.
Or are more states saying it's not worth the risk and the health and safety outweighs the financial benefit?
Well, I could see companies that aren't profiting, like North Dakota, that wouldn't ever want to take T-norm waste. T-norm is not widespread throughout the country. It's most of it is through oil field waste. It's technologically enhanced. We can look at who benefits from oil fields here, and there's only a handful of states. So there are places that have hazardous material landfills which take on far worse and dangerous products than T-norm.
Okay, and Barry somewhat referenced it, would you call it a slurry well, correct? Is that not more safe than doing a landfill?
That's an argument that can go either way. If I was for a landfill or a slurry well, is there not the same issues that could potentially happen with a pipe breaking down whole at an aquifer? Or, like the case we were saying that has the liners, we're taking the precautions. It's really what the precautions are, in that aspect. So arguing one is safer than the other is, justifiable in either case.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
I did want to circle back to the leachate because it's a very good question that you had. Back in 2019, we received a lot of rain that year, which impacted our state greatly. And that's probably one of the scariest things I've ever seen is that amount of water coming down. And that year was rough for us. We took leachate very seriously. We actually own a 60-barrel tank farm, which is on the north side of our highway, which is on the treatment plant side. And we took we basically trucked all the leachate out of that pond, so we didn't have a breach, and we filled up all of those tanks. Currently, North Dakota only has 2 Class 1 facilities that you can take your leachate to, and when all the landfills are hauling in to try to get rid of their leachate, it was very difficult for us to try to find room. There's one in Alexander, and then there's one in Stanley. So, yep. And so we probably put, I would want to say it was roughly 32,000 barrels is what we stored over there on that side of the road. So we did not have a breach. Every single day we had Wisco Trucking, which is a affiliate of Wisco, come in and have all their trucks loaded with leachate water, waiting in front of White Owls. That's the Class 1 facility that we use, waiting in front of their gate to offload leachate. I spent many long nights out there in the middle of the night because we take it very seriously, and I thought you guys should like to know that, so.
You guys are good for the moment? I'm sure there'll be more questions. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Adam.
I've got a quick one, and maybe this is still coming and we can address it later, but can anyone lay out kind of the positive economic case, whether it's for Wisco, for the oil field more broadly, whether it's job creation, et cetera, for having something like this? I don't think that's been presented yet.
I guess I would argue, there's some public concern about the impact that oil and gas has had on the state, and we all know what the positive impacts are. We see new buildings, we see people benefiting financially. I sort of look at it like there are benefits, but there are downsides. I feel North Dakota needs to be responsible for the production we have. We should be monitoring and disposing of this waste in-house and not relying on states like Montana and Idaho to basically deal with the mess that we're creating. And we're not asking to deal with the really dangerous mess. We're just asking to deal with the stuff that's fairly non-hazardous if it's treated right. So I just feel like the state of North Dakota should have some obligation to manage this waste and not rely on an outside source that could be shut down at any time.
Which I just want to add to that real quick. The state does benefit greatly, and they should put more money back into Western North Dakota. I'm sorry, I see Pat back there, and they've done a good job, but we have pumped a lot of money from this oil play into this state, and we've gotten a fraction. With all due respect.
Right, and I wouldn't argue that.
I know, Stu, I'm not debating you, I just point that
No,
out. The state
and-
benefits greatly, and they should reward the areas that were taking all these risks.
Well,
That makes sense, because we're taking.
I would argue that the risks that we're asking to take are very low compared to, you talk about financial gain. Obviously, for a facility like us and our competitors, it is a revenue stream, but it's not like Lewis had mentioned, like plutonium or something very high risk and very likely high margin. What we're asking for is low risk. It is very low reward. It's just management of waste stream that other states are either benefiting from the revenue or they're taking responsibility for waste that we are generating here in our home state.
Thanks, Stu.
You bet.
Any other questions for this group for the moment?
Just following up one more time, I'm just trying to understand kind of the magnitude of the benefit of putting something like this in. Is it something that would materially impact the competitiveness of our oil field, or is this just another project?
I would argue that if we provide the oil and gas producers of North Dakota with a lower cost option to manage their waste, it's obviously more expensive to take this waste and travel further with it. That drives up costs. If we're able to provide generators with lower costs of operation, I feel like they're more likely to invest into drilling and production into the state. So we talk about the economic impact. I mean, it's dollars pretty much staying within our state rather than somebody out of state benefiting it. Again, at a low risk.
So just to be clear, this would be allowed for other companies? Like, this isn't just built for you guys?
We are one of two companies applying to manage this waste. Yes, it's open to, we would utilize it internally, and it would be open to other generators as well.
Basically, instead of them trucking it to Montana or Colorado or Texas, it would be to these facilities?
Potentially, yes.
Because that's one thing about the product they're talking about, it's already on the road. It's traveling through here, as we speak. So it's nothing new. And, good or bad, we're making it ourselves, and I think it's not very neighborly to truck it across the line and turn around and leave.
And I would point out that this stuff is being stockpiled at a number of already licensed facilities. So what you have is compilation of this stuff waiting for full loads to jump on our highways and travel long distances, where this mitigates risk. The travel times are shortened, and the frequency that this stuff stockpiles in other places is reduced, in my opinion.
Okay, it doesn't look like any questions yet. I'm sure there'll be more as we get going, because we still got to go through the public hearing, so. All right, thank you, guys and gals. Okay, this is a public hearing, so is there any other public input? Any public input?
Thanks, Tate. Dave Arnson. My wife Janice was already up here and presented some, but I just wanted to add to, I've talked to one of the neighbors out there, and to give you a little background, my mother's homestead, her family's homestead properties within about 2 miles of the facility. But I talked to one of the adjacent neighbors out there, and he's already having issues with just the disposal they have there now, with garbage, mud on the road, which has already been brought up, things like that. And when he addresses it with them, they accuse him of harassment. And, you know, I've known Wisco. I was 35 years in the oil industry myself, in the drilling fluid end. I know Wisco. I see Kelly Heller here. All of his family, from his dad to all his brothers, worked at Wisco. That was a good, reputable company. They've changed. They're not the local good neighbor thing like Barry brought up. And so I have concerns that they can't handle the criticism and the questions they have now with the facility. How is it going to go forward when they start taking on this additional stuff? So that's just my opinion.
Thanks, Dave. Okay.
Dennis Barkey. I'm a longtime resident of Williams County. I don't live near the landfill west of Williston, but the 13-mile solid waste landfill. But I have a question. Why would you want to load up a truck with radioactive material, take it from McKenzie County or Montreal County, bring it to Williams County, when you have a slurry well that's capable of handling that material in McKenzie County? And the gentleman that runs the operation is here. You probably should talk to him, get some background on that. It's way safer, in my opinion. And for a background, I helped develop Indian Hills Disposal in the 80s. So I've been around disposals for a long time. Excuse me, for a long time. And they're only as good as the people that run them. They can give you all the scenarios they want to, but you got to have good people and want to do it the right way. So that's my comment.
Thanks, Dennis. Okay. We have another gentleman coming up.
Excuse me. My name's Keith Norbeck. I represent KT Enterprises. I'm one of the owners. It's a locally owned business based out of Wofford City, and I just kind of felt compelled to make a few comments just based off of some of the questions you guys have already asked. So just kind of give you a quick background of what we've done so far. We started working on, I personally started working on slurry injection in North Dakota all the way back in 2012. We looked at it for drill cuttings injection, and we actually had a permit down by Killdeer, just about, 5-10 miles north of it in 2014. Then oil price collapsed, and we decided not to move forward with it, and now we are where we are today. And TNORM is such a big issue. So in 2018, my father and I took over 2 saltwater disposal wells, and we were dealing with these same issues that everybody's confronted with in the industry, operating wells. And it's like, well, we can handle this in a better way. So we immediately started working on it. We had a long road. We permitted it. We worked with the Industrial Commission, permitted the well, and was on the docket in 2020, right at the very beginning. Pre-COVID, everything was still looking pretty decent in the oil industry. We had that hearing happen, and obviously everything fell off in the oil industry. We still got our permit. We got our TNORM license. We drilled the well in September of last year. We completed the well in November, and we started building the facility in January. We finally started receiving waste just a little bit here and there. March, started injection operations in April, and so far, as of yesterday, we've injected just a little over 9,000 barrels of TNORM waste down our well. The majority of the waste that we've received so far has been from operators that have been stockpiling it, waiting for us to be able to receive it. The vast majority of that waste so far would have went to Idaho, Colorado, or Texas. Now, there was just a few things that were said about, risks related to slurry injection wells that I'd kind of just like to address and what our capabilities really are. We're in the first inning in this deal for slurry injection. We started out, it's like, okay, when we were first, back in 2012, we were looking at drill cuttings. It's pretty challenging, a lot of waste. How are we gonna do that process? And it generated a big number of capital that it was gonna take to do it. It's like, well, let's start with T-Norm, liquid. It's generally coming in a liquid format, flows into a treating plant. Treating plant is separated, put in a pile. That's why they say it's, technologically enhanced, is because it's usually concentrated into, just a dirt, and then it's mobilized out of the state currently. So the risks related to it, we only store a very small amount at the surface because we're constantly trying to move this material through. That's how we make money, is by injecting it. If it builds up, we're not making money, right? So we're not gonna be able to accept waste. We are limited. Our storage, our site is small. It's 4.2 acres. We have a concrete pad all this material is offloaded onto. It looks like a saltwater disposal site. I know you guys are probably all familiar with what that might look like. So very low impact. We're not storing it. We have a pretty rigorous monitoring program in place to make sure our waste is getting to where we thought it was going to and what we were planning. And so all that's looking really good so far, since we're right here at the beginning. It's right in line with what we're expecting. The next part is just a comment about, what would happen if, what's the risk of a slurry well and maybe affecting groundwater. Our well construction looks like normal wells. We spent a significant amount of time, and we had to make sure that we had great cement jobs. And so, we have surface casing ran through the aquifers. We got heavy pipe down the well. We got big pipe. We got tubing. Everything's done through tubing, and we have to have MITs for that. We had to test our pipe to greater than the maximum allowable injection pressure to make sure that if there was ever an issue with our tubing, that we wouldn't breach and go out where we don't want to. The final thing I'll say just about the process is that we actually inject the waste below salt layers, which gives the best confining layer that would ever exist. And we're blessed with that here in North Dakota, that salt at that depth acts plastic. And so it's as close as a scientist or a geomechanical engineer will ever say impossible that we could ever breach it and see that waste come out of where we're actually placing it. Then the only other thing, I just wanted to address your question on limits. So, and then also economics. So right now, we're not limited on a radiation level. We're limited on how much we can store. It's all related to what we're storing, and it's related to what our bond was. We likely could increase that if we ever needed to. I don't see the need to. We're just gonna keep moving the waste through the process and not store it at the surface. Now, economics, this waste is traveling some distance, the difference in cost and what the impact to the industry is. There was that study that was done by the WDEA, and I think it was 80,000 tons roughly was moving around of solids that it is. And, you could probably just throw a number, $200 a ton or something like that this is, impact to the industry. So, $16, $20 million problem to the industry. So what is the impact to the Bakken by solving this problem? It's an ESG thing. It's doing the right thing. It's putting it where, back down into the earth, long way away from potable aquifers. It's not about significant cost savings. The difference between a truck traveling from McKenzie County to Glendive isn't substantially different. We're talking a couple hours at, $120 an hour. So now, with that being said, on impacts, the thing that the big impacts being created is the waste that was going to Idaho, Colorado. We're gonna see those savings, through the process that we're injecting it with. So I guess at that point there, I can't remember if I made any other notes. I just opened it up to see if you guys had any questions for me since I was here. But
I do. How deep is your well?
The well is 8,050 feet, and we're actually injecting at 7,585 feet.
And what kind of operating pressures do you run at to get it injected? Or is it new well, is it on a vacuum or what? I mean, because sooner or later, when you start stuffing this down hole, you will fill your formation up in your operating pressures will increase. What kind of, I mean, you know, your tubing, what, you know, I mean, I've worked in the oil field plenty. I mean, you can, you know, tubing parts, holes, casing parts, you know, you check your backside for zero pressure, everything's good. But once you open a valve up there and the backside's pressured up, okay, where's it at? How far has it gone? How do you how do you fix that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we're constantly monitoring second by second data when we're injecting slurry. That's the first thing that people would need to understand as part of our monitoring program. And we have casing pressure constantly being monitored, and we're maintaining that at zero, just like we would on any UIC well here in the state. We MIT'd our casing behind our, between our tubing and our casing to 4,500 pounds. And our maximum injection pressure that we can go to is 4,200 PSI. We currently injecting at just under 1,600 pounds consistently, and over the life of the well, we do expect to see a gradual increase of injection pressure over time, and then that'll dictate when we'll drill a second well. So eventually, the cost of putting it down that well will increase, and it's going to make economic sense to drill another well in that property. And where we're currently at, we have over a half section available to us to add additional injectors. So.
And are you the only T-norm slurry injection well in the state?
Currently, yes. Yep.
And are there such wells in other states?
Yes, thanks for that question. So this technology is not brand new. So it was originally the first time was in 1980, approximately, plus or minus a few years, in Alaska. And they were confronted with an issue up there that they had all these drilling pits all over the place, and they needed to clean them up because there was leaching issues going through and the permafrost and whatnot. And they were confronted with, it's like, okay, we're gonna either barge it down to Seattle by boat, or we're gonna pump it down using slurry fracture injection. So that's where it was born. It was a patented process for over 20 years, which is probably why it didn't proliferate everywhere. And that patent ran out like 2005 sometime, roughly around there. And so currently, where there's slurry injection wells, there's 8 full-time operating ones in Alaska. I think there's about close to 100 globally that are currently operating right now. Down in Texas would be the next nearest one in lower 48. That, there's probably five or six down there serving all of Texas. So and then offshore drilling rigs in challenging places that are very remote, not the Gulf of Mexico, they actually use this process to actually dispose of all their drill cuttings. So in Alaska right now, they're literally pumping all their drill cuttings, everything out through this process.
I think we're okay on that.
Okay.
Thanks, Keith. How do you say your last name?
Norbeck, Norbeck. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, final time. Any other public input? Close the hearing. I have a follow-up question. This is probably more back to Sam. What do we do with the township? Because the township obviously is impacted more than any of us, and I think they need to have some say in it as a township board. Shirley, go ahead.
Sam, who all was notified of this? How many home landowners or whatever were notified?
So our notification process covers 1 mile radius around the site. So everyone within that 1 mile radius would be notified.
Is that only a resident or a landowner?
Landowner.
Because I have had one call about this, which is, I didn't know about it until I got a call last week about it. And that actually wasn't from a person who lived close to it. It was somebody else who'd heard about it somewhere. And she wanted to know where it was located, so then I started looking into it. And I would also comment that the township has had no complaints about the disposal site, the Wisco disposal site. So if somebody in the area's had problems with it, they haven't complained to the township.
So do we want to proceed without their comments and allow them the opportunity to bring their comments, I guess, at that point to the Board of County Commissioners? Is that a fair to keep moving forward?
Yeah, we could do something like that. We don't, our next meeting isn't scheduled till July, the second week in July, but we could call a special meeting to consider this.
Okay, I think I would suggest that. Is that a fair, is that, I guess I'm looking at staff.
And I can actually print you out a form right after this and hand it to you and everything like that.
And if you let us know when the meeting is and you would like staff representation, we can always make that meeting as well.
Okay, what I'll need to do is I need to contact my board members and see when we can get together and then get Beth to do a notice of special meeting.
Okay, okay, so with that being said, we have a roadmap on that. Now we need to deal with the issue at hand. That is the CUP. What are the wishes? What are the comments?
It's very hard for us to make a decision on this without the comments from that township. So if we push it ahead without their comments, we're not hearing their comments. Are you comfortable with that?
Typically, no, I'm not. I mean, I'll be frank, I'm not. We rely heavily on the township because they're the ones that have to deal with the problems typically. And they are a sanctioned board. They're an operating, functioning board. Where some boards, some townships are not. So in this case, Round Prairie is a fully functioning board. And I have no problem if we need to sit idle, allow them the opportunity to have their township meeting with their people in their township, and then bring it back to this board.
I
don't have a problem. I mean, that's fine, being blunt.
I would consider a motion to do that if at that time we just focus solely on the comments from the township board rather than have another rehash of the whole project.
Yeah, I agree. If that's the route you go, you wish to table this, get the comments from the township board, comes back to us in July, whenever that meeting may be, or will be. And that can just be under old business. That does not need to be another public hearing. We can close, the hearing is closed. So we will not open it up. So we will just have it under old business, and that's how we'll deal with it.
I would make that motion.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
I'd second for discussion.
Okay, we have a couple seconds. Okay, we got a motion for tabling it, getting staff, township comments from their board back to us to go under old business and not have it will not be a public hearing again, just simply for our discussion and making a decision. Is that how you guys understand it?
Yes.
Anybody else? Okay. Any other discussions relating to this matter?
Well, I guess as long as we got it up, yeah, I have two questions.
Go ahead.
One of them, we keep talking about the transportation, about it running through here, but, and maybe I'm wrong, Williams County does have oil production, but I think Dunn, Montreal, and McKinsey County have got more than we've got. Well, none of them got proposed sites, and all that stuff's coming into Williams County. So to me, you're increasing the traffic of hazardous coming in.
Well, I would agree, but I don't know if they could be at the same pace we're at right now. You know, somebody may be looking down there, because it's clearly, you know, it's an economic issue. If it was my company, I would rather get it handled there than rather pay, you know, 130 whatever an hour to truck it up here. I mean, it's a big difference.
Well, that's the second part of my question is, this was brought before us a year ago? The first time we brought it?
Is that the first one up near Blackdale?
And I haven't heard of any other county that's even talked about it, that the paper or the radio have done anything. So are we the only county that is even looking at doing anything on it?
Well, that I don't know, but I mean, I didn't know about the slurry well either in McKenzie County till I heard on the radio it was up and running, so I don't know.
Seems to me like we're increasing the traffic coming in if they're bringing it from all these other counties to us instead of us taking it out of here.
Well, it would be nice if the big four would, take care of it on their own, yes. Because it gets right back to the same thing as about being neighborly. You know, I don't really think we need to be dumping our waste in Montana, and I don't think Dunn needs to be dumping it in Williams, so.
Any other questions or comments? Roll call on the motion, please.
Adam,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Barry,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Sherelle,
Yes.
Louise,
Yes.
Shane,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Tate.
Yes, motion carries. So Sam, you can coordinate, you guys can coordinate with Sherelle and whatnot, and obviously you coordinate with Paul and his group, so the ball's not dropped somewhere, I guess is what I'm saying. Okay, next one. Number 5, really technically number 6. Planning and zoning for a zone change to heavy industrial for a 103-acre parcel. This is what we just talked about, this area. This is to get it in compliance with the new ordinance. And it's currently, it's out in Round Prairie Township. Sam?
That covers it.
I mean, that's pretty much what we're doing. Okay, I'm gonna open up the hearing. Any public input? Any public input? Last time, any public input? Close the hearing. What are the wishes of the board?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Yes.
Is there any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Sherelle,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Shane,
Yes.
Louise,
Yes.
Adam,
Yes.
Barry,
Yes.
Tate.
Yes, motion carries. Next one, Secure Energy Services USA for a conditional use permit amendment to the T-Norm Waste Disposal Plant. It's currently zoned heavy industrial. It's out in Blacktail Township. Sam?
So as mentioned before, this is a similar request. A conditional use permit was granted to Marquee Alliance, which is a division of Secure Energy Services. This was granted in 2012 for the purpose of a special waste landfill. The additional disposal of T-Norm is where their conditional use permit amendment stems from. So this would be in addition to their existing special waste landfill. A little bit of a conditional use permit amendment history. Secure had submitted an application to Williams County for an amendment to their CUP back in the fall of 2019. In December, the board placed a moratorium on all pending and future zoning applications. The next section within your staff report is a little bit about a brief summary of DEQ's review. So like I mentioned, we had lots of discussion with the Department of Environmental Quality during this moratorium period to gather more information about T-Norm and specifically their process. We, as you know, are not experts on T-Norm or oil field disposal at all. We're simply just focusing on the land use sides of things. So we're looking at things like access, compatibility, suitability, the geography of the site, et cetera. So we wanted to get the Department of Environmental Quality's interpretation of their review process. So that is included in this staff report as well. The exact same questions as what was included in the previous application. We did receive township comment from Blacktail. The Blacktail Township Board did recommend approval. It passed on the Township Board 2-1 in favor under the conditions the state of North Dakota has provided with the limited tons and picocurie limits. So that was included in your staff report. That was just submitted to staff earlier this week, so it wasn't included in the staff report that went out virtually. Like with the other request, staff had commented on the evaluation criteria specific to this site. So you'll see that included in your packet as well. And those same 5 conditions are listed. This one, there is one difference. So staff had spoke with the Department of Transportation in relation to this site, so secure site, and they had requested that they would perform a traffic operations study and implement traffic operations study recommendations if and when deemed necessary by the Department of Transportation. So that is a different comment included in this report. The other comments just are related to pretty much following local zoning and subdivision regulations, as well as local fire and other applicable ordinances, codes, rules, and regulations, as well as any regulations related to the disposal of T-norm or landfills in general at the state and federal levels. And then there is a stipulation in here to only accept what is currently required or allowed by the state. So like I mentioned, if they were to change their footprint, if they were to change the level of picocuries per gram that they could accept, then they would have to come before you again. And I do believe the applicant is in the audience and has a small presentation as well.
Okay, any questions for Sam at this time? Okay, I'm gonna open up the hearing. It's the public hearing, yep, you can come on up.
Worked really hard to keep it simple.
Sir, if you want to come point out the files.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you bet. Since we have some new commissioners, I thought I'd take a minute and go through the presentation as quickly as possible out of respect for your time. 13 Mile Landfill is a special waste and small volume industrial waste landfill. It's, if you want to go to the next slide, that's a picture of it. Looks pretty good after that rain, doesn't it? It's about 14 miles outside of town, so it's a good distance. You can see in this next slide, the red markers are where residences exist. It's a 160 acre parcel. Right now, there's about 45 acres that's actually developed. There's 3 cells currently that have been developed at the site, plans for a 4th cell, as well as a leachate pond expansion that is also part of a major permit modification coming up. Talking about norm and T-norm, where does it come from? Of course, you have uranium and thorium that occur naturally in the ground. And when you extract crude oil, gas, even water from the ground, you end up with some radionuclides that come up because radium-226, 228, lead-210, they are water soluble and mobilized by the production water. So up they come, up the pipe, accumulates in scale. It accumulates in the systems, in particular in the bottom of tanks, and it settles out of the production water and into those tank bottoms. And that's where we get most of the high concentrations, especially here in Williams County. Honestly, the highest levels of T-norm in the Bakken you'll find in Williams County, down in McKenzie County, and then over toward the reservation is where you see the highest concentrations. So it's actually it is actually fairly regionalized even within the Bakken. Next slide. So just for some context,
where does our exposure to radiation come from in general? Of course, in our water and the tanks on the farm. Uranium is in food supplies, potassium-40 in bananas. Radon gas and the sun and the earth are major contributors to some of our exposure. And believe it or not, the medical community is a huge contributor to the dose that we actually receive. The average U.S. citizen, you can see there in the graphic on the upper right-hand side there, fully half of our exposure to radiation actually comes from the medical community. About 4 weeks ago, I was at a wastewater treatment plant in Colorado, and we were surveying a new facility. They were very concerned about new digesters that they'd installed. And we went down into the bowels of this facility, and we're taking our instrumentation. Just like this, we're taking our instrumentation, and we were very, very surprised. I had our board-certified health physicist there. We were very surprised that instruments that had background readings in Colorado of about 15 microrankin per hour were reading 10 to 15,000 microrankin per hour. We just about fell over. My health physicist didn't believe it. He's 52 years in the industry, and he just about freaked out. His eyes got big. Of course, as a radiation guy, I get kind of excited when I see high levels. He went out to his car and got his own instrument because he didn't believe mine. And sure enough, he came back in and it was reading 10 to 15,000 microrankin per hour. Well, it turns out that the facility manager had been to the doctor that morning, and he'd been injected with radioactive dyes, and the plant was just fine, but he was screaming hot. But it's kind of an interesting thing, you know. We'll let physicians do anything to us, you know, but we're scared of a little bit of radioactivity that occurs naturally in the ground. And I only offer that as a way of comparison. Again, if you look at that chart there, so much of our exposure is coming from the medical community. The other portion of that chart, that big green section, 37% or 2/3 of that other half come from breathing, from radon gas exposure, from us just walking around, from us being here in the building right now, breathing radon gas, and we can't get away from it. So that's really where most of our dose is coming from. If you look at some common comparisons, in North Dakota, our maximum concentration for disposal by TNORM rule is 50 picocuries per gram. We've got phosphate fertilizer in the range of 123 picocuries per gram, the stuff we spread on our fields. Granite countertops, coffee grounds, smoke detectors, 1 million picocuries right there in your bedroom. Actually produced in a nuclear reactor. It's americium, which is a derivative of plutonium. So we have to accept that there is radioactivity around us. Some cat litter. I went to Menards this week. Turn this on. So we've got higher levels of background right here in this room. It's reading about 13 microrankin per hour, which is 12 to 13. In the store, it's reading about 6. So it climbed to about 17 microrankin per hour here in this room. Turn off that sound so I don't wear you out. But in the store itself, the background was 6 to 7, and the kitty litter was 14. And so at twice background, the regulators would tell you that it's TNORM impacted and that you can't put it in a landfill in North Dakota. So if you're throwing away your kitty litter, you're breaking the law right now. This is a sample of the residual material that typically would go into a landfill. It's dirty dirt. You'll see this will read about 27 microrankine per hour, which would be about 22 picocuries per gram roughly. 28, 29, I found a hot spot, 31. And again, it's somewhat impacted by our background in this room. If you want to use it. Yeah, I know, right? You'll be good, glad to know that it's really not.
I don't think anybody is under. Yeah, that's a fair statement. So I think we know what's here, we know what exists. How do you deal with it? With good, obviously good management.
So this, last object lesson here, this Coleman lantern, 90 to 99 picocuries per gram. It's a mantle that you'd have in a Coleman lantern, and it's about 1.5 times what you could put in the landfill if it was approved for disposal. So these things do exist in our natural environment. So if you look at other landfills, Montana is at 50 picocuries per gram. They passed their rules last year. Idaho accepts up to 1,500 picocuries per gram. That's on one of your summary sheets there. And then, of course, Colorado accepts up to 12,000. And there are places in Idaho that it's virtually unlimited. They use slurry injection as well. So 50 picocuries per gram simply matches the levels accepted in Montana today. International perspective, North Dakota is 5 times more restrictive than what most international rules. They use a becquerel as the standard, and that converts to 27.3 picocuries per gram. So just for perspective, the rules here are about 5 times more restrictive. So the regulators have done a very good job globally, I'll say, of keeping North Dakotans safe. So then, excuse me, can you go back just a second? Yep, just make another point. Just because we can measure things doesn't make them inherently dangerous, if that makes sense. We measure all kinds of things in the drinking water treatment realm in parts per million or parts per billion. Just because we can measure it doesn't mean that it's enough to kill you. And in the same way, radiation is the most studied hazard in the history of the world because of all the nuclear bombs, triggers, testing, nuclear reactors, all the things that have been done over the years. We know more about radiation than anything else. So although it's a mystery to much of the general public, it's not a mystery in the science realm. So 1 picocurie, for perspective, is 1 trillionth of a curie. That's 10 to the minus 12. That's a lot of zeros in front of that. So very, very, very low measurements. Madame Curie was the one who defined that. She was ingesting large volumes of radioactivity in the 1900 area to test all of this out. Next slide. This is all part of an energy spectrum. And if you look at things like dental x-rays at 10,000 microrem per scan, drinking water, we ingest radioactivity through drinking water. In Colorado, we get more of it, 5,000 microrem per year. Then radon gas, 200,000 microrem per year. A CAT scan at 200,000 microrem per year. So this is the dose that we're getting to our bodies. And then smoking at 280,000 microrem per year if you're a 1-pack-a-day smoker. Compare that with the radiation at the fence line of the landfill at 600 microrem per year. So this is very, very valuable perspective. We'll go get that CAT scan at 200,000, but we're afraid to walk up to the landfill, right? So next slide. So again, the content itself, it really is just dirt. There's no tires, refrigerators, plastic bags blowing in the wind or rotting food. It's much cleaner and tidier than a municipal landfill, and the cells are closed as soon as possible. You can kind of see in that middle left side there, that's a partial closure of cell 1 right there, where you see it nicely covered with clean fill. We close those to avoid any runoff and other issues that can be created if it's an open cell. So it's to everybody's benefit to close them as soon as possible. Next slide. The landfill specifically for Secure Energy began operating in 2013. It was approved for 4.8 million tons. Again, we can only take 2,083 tons per month of T-norm impacted material, a maximum of 3,000 in any given month. And again, we believe that there is a substantial reduction to the trucking that would happen in terms of substantial benefit, specifically to Secure Energy, whose costs get passed through to the operators. You're looking at $1 million to $1.5 million a year in direct benefit in reduction of transportation and disposal costs. So there is a real number, and Secure Energy is just, we would be one of our primary customers. We already manage, or Secure does. I work on their behalf as a radiation safety officer and have for many years. Secure Energy already has 3 licensed facilities, so they're very familiar. In fact, myself, I've trained half the people in this room in radiation. I've been doing this for 12 years up here, 10 years up here. Been licensed. I have a license myself in the state, as well as supporting multiple licenses in the state. So this is what I do. I was the first person to work with the filter socks way back when, bringing containers into the state. Next slide. Analytical is required for every load. Random testing required every 10th load. All loads will be screened when they are brought in, record keeping and reporting by generator and landfill location, so we know where it's going. And portal monitors can also be used. Next slide. How are people protected? Of course, we've got a higher capital investment. If this is approved, there will be $6 million in new construction at the landfill, in part for leachate pond as well as for cell 4 to be built. So huge capital investment. We have the best safety features in all of North America, leveraging the best technology, both from the US as well as Canada. Huge executive oversight, regular trips from senior management out of Canada. Secure Energy operates 6 landfills, including 13 Mile. The detailed plan of operations has been in place for years. We already have the 3 licensed FSTs. We've got an exceptional safety record. And next slide. So again, some of the features, there's a 60 mil liner, as well as an impermeable clay base. When the landfill is permanently closed, it receives a full 10 feet of clean cover, as well as daily 1 foot of clean cover. I say clean, other dirty dirt, but non-T-norm impacted dirt going over the top. So it's effectively being mixed in every day. Next slide. So because of the high volumes of drill cuttings and other things that come in, again, you're looking at only 25,000 tons per year of impacted material being mixed. About 9 to 1 is the ratio. Paul with Bar was right on task in that 9 to 10 to 1 ratio would be what you would expect. You're not going to find any dose rate coming off of the landfill itself once it's filled. It's just not going to be there. And all higher level material is going to continue to be transported out of state. US Ecology receives about 1 in 5 of the loads that Secure Energy generates, and that would continue to happen as it does today. Next slide. Lots and lots of accountability, internal audits, state regulator, approved plan of operations, licensing accountability to both radiation control as well as to solid waste. We have unannounced inspections all the time and testing. During the rain event last week, 3 different employees went up, one at 7 p.m., one at midnight, and then first thing the next morning to watch for overflow. We're all over it. The regulators are all over it. Annual licensing and inspection fees of $154,000 a year, almost $3 million in financial assurance. And then there's provisions for state cleanup funds, cradle to grave accountability with producers, and backstopped by federally by EPA Superfunds. How are neighbors protected? Again, constant inspections, regular inspections by radiation control. I know on the facilities that I oversee, there's been 3 inspections in the last 2 weeks where I've gotten phone calls to do follow-up questions. So they are out there. Dave Glatt, Dave Stratinger, and his team, they are all over the place all the time. Groundwater testing semi-annually by an independent engineer, not done by Secure Energy. Secure Energy, you heard the reference by WISCO to 5 monitoring wells. The requirement is for 2 groundwater monitoring wells. Secure Energy has 12. And that was done before they had TNORM expectations. So you can see we go above and beyond. Independent radiation safety training, dosimetry for workers to measure the dose that they're actually getting, to make sure that they're safe, continuous air monitoring, quarterly perimeter monitoring, monthly monitoring as the trucks leave the site, to make sure that there's no spread of contamination off the site. Next slide. This addresses some of the economics. When you look at the cost of doing business, it's actually quite significant. If you maxed out your 25,000 tons, it would cost you $17.26 per ton more to manage TNORM waste. And that does not include the $6 million that's going to be invested in the capital infrastructure to build the next cell. So it's a big number, right? The average retail price today for special waste landfill is running $18 to $20 a ton. So you're talking about basically doubling the cost to have TNORM waste. But you know, the other side of that is Oaks landfill today charges $85 a ton. And so if the price was 40 or 50 here, you would still see some good savings. Next slide. In general, just a comment, Secure Energy has a fantastic safety culture. They've been a great community partner. They are all about recycling and minimizing waste. That's what their full-service terminals do. They separate out production water, return it back to the ground from where it came. They extract and squeeze out as much oil as they can and market that. And then you have a little bit of dirt left that has to be managed. And a lot of it, approximately 50% of it is TNORM impacted. So, next slide. Just a quick summary of community involvement. Secure's always been very heavily involved. To my knowledge, they only have 1 Canadian employee in the States. Everybody else is local. So a great local employer. They're hiring like crazy right now. They're desperate for people. So if you have somebody looking for a job, I'm not addressing you guys individually, but put the word out. They need help right now. And they've been involved in, gosh, anybody who's asked for money has gotten it at some point, I think. So that's what I've got, and I'm available for questions.
Anybody have any questions at the moment?
Yeah, how long has Montana been accepting TNORM?
Oaks Disposal, my recollection was built about 2012. Yeah, 2012 by Ross Oakland was the guy. It's later bought by what is now known as Buckhorn Waste.
So then second part, I guess, I keep bringing up the transportation. So if we open up, what's the chances that other states are gonna start bringing in to our facilities like we're doing to Montana right now?
That's a great question. my company, Radiation Pros, we operate in about 7 states today. And I can tell you that except for level limitations, we never go anyplace except the closest, most compliant facilities because it's not worth it. The transportation costs always overtake the disposal costs. So it's never worth it for us. The only thing that would ever make any sense is if there were producing wells going down Highway 2 across into Montana. That would be about it. You know, it'd have to be really close to make any sense. Otherwise, you're going to go to Oaks Disposal, or if you're in Wyoming, you're going to go to US Ecology, which is where we go today, US Ecology. You're going to go to Oaks, or you're going to go to Colorado, Deer Trail, Colorado. So it's not going to happen. I mean, I can tell you, because I go into about 6 different facilities, that it won't happen.
The other part.
It's a great question.
Is there precious metals coming up in this T-norm that they're extracting, or I don't hear anything about that?
Yeah, fascinating question. You know, we're actually working today with a Texas firm. It's an international conglomerate, but my company is working with a company called USA Rare Earth, who's interested in mining lithium specifically, right? That's a big deal right now for batteries and such. And the uranium and thorium is part of their process, but they are waste materials in trying to get to the rare earth metals. So we're helping them get radioactive materials licenses to manage it as a waste product, not as a, but it's another great question. Fascinating.
So how many, if just for instance, you and Wisco were both approved and you can each take 3,000 ton a month?
Yep.
So you're talking about 72,000 tons a year.
Yeah.
How many tons is there to begin?
It's-
I mean, how, do we have a number on how much is trucked out of state?
Yeah, right now the estimate.
Oh, she's nodding.
Yeah, in downturn, and they can confirm this, but I believe the number is 80 to 90,000 tons right now in the downturn that is continuing to be trucked out of state. 80 to 90,000 tons. So it's not an unlimited market. Keith is right about that. It's definitely not an unlimited market. It's a fairly niche thing, but it is a special waste and it has to be managed properly. It's a big deal.
How many aquifers are up in that area?
I would have to check on that. Right? I would have to check on
Well,
that.
I mean, I know there's a few of them. I guess that was
Yeah.
my point.
It-
That's obviously pretty important.
Well,
that we're very
yeah.
energy driven, agriculturally driven.
Absolutely. Yeah, let me, I'll give you one other point. Not only do we have the 12 groundwater monitoring wells already in place up there, but unlike any other landfill in the state, we collect our leachate and store it in tanks. And then we truck it. It all goes to our Stanley FST, which is a class 1 injection well, specifically designed to take leachate. We do have a leachate pond as well. That's designed for overflow. It's not designed for primary retention. And so anything that went into there eventually would be trucked off and injected. And that is, that's not just a function of us doing things better, although that's part of it. We do have a industrial classification on our well, and that limits what we can do with that leachate. And a class 1 injection well is required to do injection on it. We can't take it to just any saltwater disposal.
Okay, any other questions from at this time? Okay.
Great questions.
I don't want to say we're good for the time being, but
Thank you. I think we wore you out before, so I'm glad to try to keep it short.
we'll go through the hearing. Okay, this is a public hearing. Is there any public input?
Janice Arnson again. I just want to make sure that you guys know that my comments stand with this, with Secure's application as well. I think your questions and discussion have been good, especially with the transportation of the trucks. Again, it's unintended consequences that may happen because of this. But I think it's again, a great way for some of the other parts of the state to help contribute to some of the oil revenue that they are receiving. Again, I think of the coal mines that it'd be a good place for them to receive some of this waste. So, thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Okay, any other public input?
Was not planning on being here, but I am.
State your name for the record, please.
Kirsten Fulden.
Thank you.
Fun fact, I work at Wisco. I live in Blacktail Township with my family, with my kids, on 10 acres. I never got a notice about this hearing, found out about it at work. But you know, all the stuff that you guys have talked about tonight, it's not dangerous. It's not harmful. And I mean, there's plenty of information out there. If you smoke a cigarette, you're getting more radiation. And as long as you're not eating it, it's not hurting anyone. It's all around us, in our community, on our roads, in our trucks, you know, coming out of the oil field. It's just a byproduct of the oil field. And so I'm working in it and I live in it. Like, I'm in the Blacktail Township. I live right by Secure Energy's landfill. So I've done a lot of research on it, and it's not that harmful. And if you guys if you guys look into it, it's really not. That was just my comment.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. Okay, last time. We have a gentleman coming up.
Good evening. My name is Eugene Davis. I live in Ray, North Dakota. Resident here in North Dakota, and for the record, former manager of Secure Energy's 13 Mile landfill for 3 years. I wanted to comment on a lot of the questions that were asked tonight. There were a lot of really good questions and some information that was posed. One of them that came up was transportation. Another one that came up was we had talked about waste leaving the state. Secure did a great job of recognizing that we've got a lot of waste that's produced here. Should probably be disposed here. The analogy that was used of trash being thrown over the fence in other meetings was also a good analogy. That being said, a lot of this waste is produced in other counties, and Secure has brought up before that the waste that they're bringing in is predominantly their waste. At this time, the 13 Mile facility, 13 Mile FST, Stanley FST, full service terminal, and Keene full service terminals are the three facilities that they're going to be bringing their waste in from. Of those three facilities, your facility here closest to you is 13 Mile. It's been reduced down to 12-hour staffing. It's the least producing facility out of the three. If you look at drilling proposed in the future, there's very limited drilling in Williams County in comparison to the other counties, especially those closest to the reservation. And then with regard to T-norm, it was also brought up that a lot of the T-norm that's produced in higher levels, I've worked with several of the gentlemen in this room and have had a great experience and a great opportunity to work hand in hand with them and learn from them. And work on several of the projects that they've worked on and remediate a lot of the problems that have arisen over the last 10 years in this area. In my experience, the higher level of T-norm that you'll see is actually closer to the Tobacco Gardens region. And we've got a geographic boundary, the lake, the river, between us and them. So it's not beneficial to bring that higher level material from the Tobacco Garden area or even Montreux County, where there's usually significantly higher levels than there is here in Williams County, and truck it around that lake up here to Williams County. And as a resident of Williams County and coming from Ray to work in Williston, I pass that landfill at least twice a day. That's a significant concern of mine. Another member of the public who also asked me and urged me, and I'll be honest, I didn't really want to come in tonight, but I don't have a dog in this fight anymore. My wife reminded me that sometimes there's the right thing to do, and I should probably come in. So that being said, one of the local landowners had, sorry, I lost my train of thought, but local landowners had brought up, anyways, I'll get back to it. I'm sure I'll think of it here in a second, so forgive me. Transportation, I started to touch on it. Tobacco gardens, your highest levels, those are generally going to Texas. Lower levels that don't go to Texas, they brought up, they go to U.S. Ecology. Even lower levels go over to Montana. Montana is obviously comfortable with that material going to their landfill over there with the levels that they've already approved. As one of the gentlemen stated, we do have a disposal well at Johnson's Corner. The history has changed significantly since the 80s when this first started. There are other folks that have tried injection here in North Dakota and without success. But if there is a company and there is a person who I think could pull this off, I think that company is in this room tonight and spoke to you. And I think we as residents should take a serious look at that option. As he said, we are in the first inning. It's very early on, but they've successfully run for 3 months. This is a limited waste. We're talking 90,000 tons a year. They've already injected 1/10 of that, 9,000 barrels rather, not tons. My apologies. But so far it's been a success. So if we're talking about a limited number of waste and they have an unlimited ability to take this radioactive waste, I strongly think we should consider that, or at least play the extra innings in this baseball game until it's exhausted. We mentioned transportation. Why would we take, and even as just a resident, I have questions about this. As an environmentalist and a professional in the industry, I have questions about this. Why would we take waste from a Keene facility past Johnson's Corner to come up here to Williams County and dump it in our backyard when we know that the community doesn't stand behind it? Let's at least play it out a little while. If it is successful, we can always drill more wells. These companies could explore that technology. They've boasted that they're experts in the drilling and injection process. They too could partake in that as well. So let's explore it a little bit longer. Let's not truck it through multiple counties to put it in our backyard until we know for sure that we're making the right decision. They did touch on one other fact too, that as environmentalists, the state asks us, they actually bring it up in their landfill training and certification course that a lot of us are required to take to handle material. They ask us to be stewards of our community, of our globe, and try to minimize the waste as much as possible. And it was made to sound that solidifying materials is actually reducing the waste. But if you think about it, you're taking, usually, most often, tank bottoms are a much higher level than what we're talking about accepting at this landfill. And you have to be careful with the terminology that you use. The states here in this room tonight, it's dilution is a solution to pollution, right? But you're blending, you're adding other like materials, or in some cases, many cases, you're adding absorbent, which is approved, but it's clean, to this material to get the levels to an acceptable level to go into this landfill. So in fact, we're actually making a bigger mess. It's at a lower concentration. We talked about sugar in a soda. It's a lower concentration, but that's in reality, everyone in this room knows that's the fact. So instead of one small truck, of big trucks or multiple trucks to get it to that lower level to put it in our backyard, I don't think that's a responsible way as environmentalists to dispose of this if we haven't proven out that the other option works or doesn't work. I think we should take that small amount of material in its raw form and try to see if we can inject it. And not just inject it, we're injecting it 8,000 feet in the ground. We're letting it percolate over time. We've asked questions about the time that a liner will last. I stood at this podium in front of you and said that I didn't know how long that plastic liner would last. I did tell you I know that clay will last a long time. But after careful consideration over the last year, things have changed. A lot of things have changed. One of them is that injection well that's been brought up tonight. That's one I think we should strongly consider. Other things that have changed was the economic downturn. The price of oil dropped. COVID hit. A lot of people were laid off. Secure mentioned that they're hiring. They're hiring a lot of people right now. I had the unfortunate opportunity to lay off the majority of my staff at my facility, staff that trained for 3 years rigorously in preparation to stand before this board and say with confidence, and that's what one of the gentlemen here that I had forgotten earlier had mentioned, it all comes down to the people that accept this waste and how they handle this waste and the integrity behind them. Those people are gone. 9 out of 10 of the people at that landfill that were there, trained, and ready to receive this waste are gone. You're talking about $600,000 worth of labor. Secure chose to let them go. They're easy and quick to tell you that they're going to spend $6 million on infrastructure to make sure that this waste is handled properly. But it was those people that were ready to receive the waste that are no longer there that I'm more concerned about. The state requires you to have certified landfill employees on site. They do technically meet that standard. But we boasted before that the majority of our operators, 24 hours a day, had gone through that rigorous training with the state. That's not the case anymore. There's only a couple within that organization. Now, this is not a smear campaign towards Secure. This is a concerned resident speaking uncomfortably in front of all of you about some concerns that I think that you guys should really consider. If $600,000 was too much of a pill to chew on to keep the employees that were trained, then where are we going to be in a year? Where are we going to be in 5 years? Where are we going to be in 10 years? Where are we going to be in 30 years? We mentioned that one of the employees that works for Secure is Canadian. The rest are all locals, or at least that's a pretty loose term these days, myself included. I've only been here for about 10 years. That one person is a person of influence in this corporation, highest level. If you put new employees in there, I feel like we're setting them up for failure. It comes down to having the integrity and the guts to say, hey, we made a mistake at the operator level, and that operator then has to report to the manager. The manager then has to have the integrity and the guts to report it up the food chain, to middle management, to corporate, to the state. I have concerns with that. You have new employees that know that the public is not standing behind them, and if they make a mistake, that this is going to be on the mainstream media. It's been under a microscope for 4 years. So I urge you to strongly reconsider. Play out every option that's available to you. See where it takes you. Don't make a quick decision that might bite us later on down the road. And certainly, consider where the waste is coming from. If they have disposal options in their county, maybe we should use those. Maybe we should consider, why were they so quick to approve that disposal option in their backyard? Why was the state so quick to approve that disposal option? And why are we so hesitant for 4 years to accept this disposal option in our backyard? I think there's some merit to that. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Okay, last time. Any public input?
Corey Agela with Buckhorn Waste Services. Like Gene, I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but we've been brought up. Pricing's been brought up. KT Enterprises spoke. So between like the new injection well and ourselves, I would say we take a majority of the team arm out of the Bakken. We also own a landfill in Williams County, the Dishon landfill. We do have paperwork that's been filled out by Wenk for probably 3 years now. We have not submitted it because we don't see a reason for it. Volumes are down, volumes were up. We might be sitting here with Wisco and Secure as well, asking for, your permission to get granted a permit for T-Norm in Williams County. But we also want to offer any of you board members a conference call, sit down with us to discuss what we have seen over the last, I've been there since, this is my 6th year. So Buckhorn bought it in 2014. We've been managing it ever since. So you as a county board, planning commission wants to sit down with us prior to making decisions. This would even include our facility in Williams County in the future. So we would open it up to you.
Any public input? Close the hearing. Okay. You heard a lot of information. Some good, some not so good. What are the wishes of the board on this item? You can ask a question, sure.
From my understanding and just looking through the packet, that's 93 pages. If it's approved, because we keep asking, what is the long-term effect? And we're not getting that answer. I don't think we can get an answer. We have the smaller companies that are doing the injecting, like you said, on a small scale, which to me sounds great. Always do a test project before you do a large project. Then we have communities that are doing the large projects, but we've not answered that question. And I've also, is it individual companies that would be benefiting business-wise, just everything, economically, socially. But in the end, that is not necessarily our education. So what is the environmental, like if this gets passed, the next step, because it says that you guys won't even review the application until this gets accepted. So if this just does get accepted, then the DEQ, what is the test that they do? Like, do you guys go through and test the soil yourselves, or is it just a checking the application, making sure, like how in depth do you guys go?
Hi, my name is Diana Trussell, and I'm with the North Dakota Department of Environmental Quality Solid Waste Program. I believe you had some questions related to the long-term study. Dave Glott will answer that question. We've actually conducted a study with that. Related to your question of what our next steps are, if planning and zoning and the county grants a conditional use permit or the amended one, then an application is submitted to the solid waste program. A license is also submitted, a license application is submitted to the radiation control program, and then we review those, and they are based on science and law. We go through our process with it, so they'll have to submit plans for operations, waste acceptance, construction information, how they're gonna handle the waste, how they're gonna screen for it, what they would do if they need to reject it, all of that will be covered. They'll also cover any testing and monitoring requirements. And then same thing on the license side for the radiation control program with that. We review that. If we don't find any deficiencies, then we can go out for comment on a draft permit and a draft license. Based on those comments, we can either decide to approve as is, we can approve with amendments to it, or we can deny the permit. But it's all based on our science and law with that. If we find deficiencies, then we kick it back to the applicant, and they have an opportunity to fix those with it and resubmit for another review.
Good for now, for the moment? Thanks, Dan.
Yep.
Dave, I'm sorry, yep, thank you.
Yep, we'll have Dave talk about the Argonne National Laboratory study.
Good evening. My name is Dave Glott. I'm Director of the Department of Environmental Quality. I appreciate this opportunity to address the board here. A lot of questions about long-term. We're talking, once the landfill's done, they've all got the cap and they leave, what's the impact? And we had that same question. And so before we got into this, before we started developing our program, we had the question is how risky is dealing with TNORM, because nobody really knew that much about it. So we asked the Argonne National Laboratory, and we contracted with them. They are the experts. They do international studies. They do studies all the time on radiation and the impacts on human life. So what we did, we went to them and we said, don't care what the answer is, you guys figure it out. This is what we're seeing as far as TNORM in the Bakken. You tell us what's the risk. And so they did the study, and what they came up with is that the risk is primarily to the workers, those that handle the waste from inhalation and ingestion and those type of things. We also asked them, I said, look long term. So they did the what if. What if the landfill was closed, the liner failed, they drilled through it, somebody lived on top of it. In 10,000 years, they were not showing the risk to the individuals. And so we were feeling pretty confident that this is safe. And then we said, what level should we put this at? And they came up with a 50 picocuries per gram. You'll be surprised on when the question was asked before is, how come other states aren't doing this? And the term T-norm really hasn't been addressed in long term. It's just a relatively recent issue that's been brought up. Once we did the study, there were other states asking to look at our study because they felt confident. Montana had looked at the study. We've been around the country talking about our T-norm program. Other states are looking at what we've done. I do believe we're probably one of the most stringent protective programs out there. When other states are saying you can just thin spread it on the land, we're not there yet. You know, so we've looked at it, had it Oregon National Laboratory. You can access that study on our webpage, and website. I would recommend that you take a look at it. There's a lot of highly technical terms, but they do break it down to where a person like me can understand it. And so I would recommend.
You're smarter than us. How about
well,
easier breakdown?
Well, you don't know me that well, so I wouldn't make that claim just yet. But I would recommend to take a look at Oregon National Laboratory because we had those same questions. And we wanted the experts to tell us that. And bottom line, 50 picocuries, looking at the landfill, if it totally failed and the liners and everything else, they were saying you could have a farmstead live on top of the landfill and be fine. So that's all. I'll stand for any question.
Any questions for Dave? Thanks, Dave. Thanks for coming down.
Thank you.
Okay. Heard a lot of info again. Head's gonna pop. What are the wishes?
I still go back to, I'd still say Williams County is.
And I, you know, it would be really nice if we had one, McKenzie had one, Dunn had one. I mean, you know, but that's not for me.
Has, I guess to the board's knowledge, has there been any formal requests from Montana or any other state where we're sending this right now to stop doing that? Are we concerned about federal regulation crossing state lines? Is there actually a problem here that we're trying to solve?
I don't know for sure. You always hear kind of rumblings and whatnot that Montana was probably, you know, getting tired of it, but what?
It's interstate commerce, just like anything.
So they could not stop?
Not be restricted.
No? Okay, well, there's the answer.
Okay, any other questions? Any other comments? What are the wishes?
Mr. Chairman, this is Chris. We've had a lot of good discussion tonight, a lot of good questions, you know, a lot of positive answers, some answers we didn't get. But what I really feel guilty about is we took that moratorium time and didn't do anything to research the long-term consequences or how much we should take in, or should we only take it from Williams County? Things that we can control. And we took that moratorium period and didn't do anything. And I blame myself. I knew this whole T-norm issue was going to come back as soon as we got past May 31st. And we didn't do anything. And we're in the same spot we were back in December of 19. And just a comment.
Thanks, Chris.
I would have a question. Can we even legally say a business can't take material from other counties? I mean, we have all kinds of businesses in this county that service the other counties.
Intercommerce, you can't.
Well,
I-
that's
but-
interstate,
but yeah,
that's
right.
interstate. I'm talking about within the state, because we're talking about, well, McKinsey should keep their stuff in McKinsey and so forth. So then would that mean that Williams County wells can't, or places can't take theirs to the disposal, the slurry disposal in McKenzie County? I mean, I think we'd really be getting ourselves into a huge,
Yeah, I don't know.
huge mess if we started messing with that.
I mean, you start, I completely agree. We got to be careful. Don't bite the hand that may help feed you.
And I do think, I think one of the things that's pushing this, when you say, why are we suddenly talking about this, is because there's been a downturn in the oil business. They're looking to save every dollar they can, which any business would do. And traditionally, we've been very oil field friendly, so it's something I think we have to think about that side of it too. And I do think that we may be overestimating the risks with this. I have a friend who lives in Kennewick, Washington, and I don't know if you're familiar with the Tri-Cities in Washington. They live on top of a nuclear waste disposal. It was the place where they developed the atom bomb in World War II, and that's their main business out there. When her husband went out there, he was a driller in oil field here. He'd been drilling down in the Slope County, Bowman County area. They test everybody for radiation. All their employees are regularly tested every week. When he applied for the job, he was tested. He had to wait a month for the radiation level he brought from North Dakota to go down to be acceptable to work for their company.
It's interesting stuff. Okay, what are the wishes, guys and gals?
Well, Chairman, Mr. Chairman, move it on. I guess I'm just not comfortable with it. I know it has to go somewhere. Eventually, it'll probably happen. But right now, I'm not happy with it, so I'm gonna make a motion to deny.
Okay, we currently have a motion to deny. Is there a second to that? I'll ask again, do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second it, because sorry, I just feel like I have to.
Okay, we have a second. Now any further discussion?
I don't think we're solving a problem, I just think we're making more of a problem. It's a profitability deal for a company. And to me, there's too many people that are gonna get hurt for one company to make a profit. My personal opinion, and, that's what I see for it.
Yeah, I mean, I can see your point, that's, but, with what I've done with my background, I've been in the oil field and living around the oil field, it just doesn't really scare me that much. I mean, I realize like anything else, you treat it accordingly, but I think it can be treated well, or, I believe it can be handled properly. But well, it can be. Well, I mean, right. Well, that is, that's their job back there. But,
And I go back to, why are other states not doing this? Why are more states not doing this? Why is this not being, why is it not talked to more? Why are other counties in our area doing it? We have,
McKinsey is the most open county there is on this stuff. I don't see anything on them.
no, well, what, are you gonna add something new?
Well, I hope so. Try to answer some of your questions. So there are regulatory hurdles, of course, to getting a landfill approved any place, right? Because there's always a resistance to a landfill in somebody's backyard. That's just a fact. The other thing is pure economics. There is not enough naturally occurring radioactive waste, or in this region of the country, frankly, there's not enough radioactive waste to build facilities all over the place. Nobody would be bringing material in. And so, and there are federal guidelines. There's something called compact regions that do control the flow in some cases of radioactive waste. Specifically and relevant to this discussion is the Rocky Mountain Compact, which is comprised of New Mexico, Colorado, and Nevada, and they control the import and export of radioactive waste into and out of the state. So there are some federal constraints. Now, of the 8 compact regions, the Rocky Mountain is the most active in controlling that waste. The other ones deal primarily with high-level, truly nuclear waste. The only other comment I would have, we have a board-certified health physicist. He's been a health physicist for 52 years on our team. And he has worked in uranium mines in the nuclear fuel cycle his entire career. And he has a little bit of a hard time working with me on the TNORM space because he feels like he's documenting zero. So he doesn't take TNORM very seriously. Not until we start talking about 10 and 15 and 40,000 picocuries per gram does he even take an interest. So I'll just offer that up.
Thanks, Kurt. Still doesn't answer though why the counties that are adjacent to Willingham, why are they not doing it? Montreal, McKenzie, Dunn. You know, so again.
The only thing I'd add, working some with the WDEA, there was some outreach done to some facilities, for example, in Dunn County, and in particular, R360 had closed the gates on one of the landfills that the WDEA had targeted to talk about. So there is some hesitation, and with the downturn, there are some landfills that are just not operating at full capacity. And if you're looking at $154,000 a year just in the licensing fee, if you don't have some impressed waste stream, you're taking a financial gamble to pursue a TNORM waste permit.
Thanks, Kurt. Okay, Cam.
I will be brief. I realize public comment had already closed. I just wanted to address Chris's concern about the moratorium and whatnot, and I know he probably wasn't directing it towards staff. The moratorium was put in place by both boards. I just would like to defend my staff, say we have worked tirelessly through this for the past almost 2 years. Your packets have a wealth of information from questions that were asked the previous time. We went through and did our due diligence research. Sam and Lindsay worked tirelessly too. We have been on numerous Zoom calls with DEQ, with Secure, with WISCO, different meetings. I just want to put that out there that we certainly have been working through this moratorium. I'll be honest, I personally expected a little more out of the Western Dakota Energy Association. We didn't get a lot of findings from them, but they did work on it too, and they did give us a little more information. But I just wanted to get up and say that my staff has been working tirelessly through this moratorium. So,
And that's why you're a good boss, young man. All right, we have a motion.
And this is
Go ahead, Chris.
I didn't mean to direct it at staff or anybody in particular. It's just, thinking out loud, maybe we should have formed some kind of committee that looked at what research your staff put together and, develop some policies and regulations that could have guided the decision-making we need to make tonight.
And I appreciate the comments. Yeah, we did have a committee. It was myself, it was Sam, it was Commissioner Montgomery, and Commissioner Corey Hansen. And we did put a lot of the findings within the staff report. But again, we weren't able to answer everything. That we just did our best with what we had presented. But we did have a committee.
And we were hoping that WDEA was going to, well, here's the answer. But that didn't happen.
And whether it was any fault of their own or not, I know I wasn't the only one that wasn't fully satisfied.
I'm not throwing rocks at them
Sure.
either. It's just, that's just kind of how.
Yep, and I agree with you. So, thank you.
Cam. Okay. Any other comments? Roll call.
Louise?
Yes.
Shane?
Yes.
Barry?
No.
Dan? Chris?
Yes.
Sherelle?
No.
Mark?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Tate?
Yes. Motion carries. So again, you guys just coordinate with staff, like, I mean, you guys know the drill. Coordinate with Sam and staff. Okay, I want to say there's really no discussion items because there's nothing there. Next meeting is July 15th. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Yep.
Second.